Welcome to Vision to Venture. I'm Eddie, and I'm here to uncover the realities of scaling and building a tech startup. Each week, I speak to leaders within the tech space with their insights and advice on how to found, fund, and frame a tech startup. So make sure to follow and subscribe to never miss an episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vision to Venture. Today I'm joined by Max Jakobs, CEO and co-founder at Deep Mirror. Deep Mirror make AI-powered drug design, allowing every biopharma team to find better drugs faster. Hello Max, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Hello. Pleased to be here. And thanks for inviting me.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Just to start with, just a simple one. Do you want to just tell us, explain in your own words, a little bit more about Deep Mirror, what they do, and your role in the company?
Yeah, gladly. So Deep Mirror is actually quite a bit older than people might think, because we ran a consultancy for many, many years. But then around last year, we started diving more deeply into product development and how we can actually bring the technologies we have been developing to the companies that need them. And essentially what we ended up gravitating towards was to essentially make AI-powered drug discovery as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, effectively. Because what many people struggled with was applying these super technical technologies, essentially, in their own internal workflows. And then they had whole companies spinning out doing only that. Mm-hmm. And we thought that it might be a good point to actually start commoditizing these technologies and make it like super easy to use for people that might not have the technical expertise to do so.
Okay. And what is it that you do over there as the CEO and co-founder?
So I'm mainly, you could say, responsible for all the external stuff.
Okay.
So talking to investors, talking to customers, doing sales, running a bit of marketing, even though trying to outsource that. And then more, I guess, the long-term business vision. We're quite into modern product discovery and development, so I tend not to have too much of an input on that. But it's very much focused on like, okay, where could the product be in like a few years in the future, and what do we want of the product as Deep Mirror? Because we kind of try to learn what the customers want, but we might also have some requirements.
No, of course, absolutely. I mean, that's completely fair enough. And how is it that you and the rest of your team identified the specific problem or need that Deep Mirror aims to address?
Yeah, I think without like a strong insight in a given industry, it's really difficult to build a company that solves any sort of problem. So when we started out, we actually deliberately didn't quite set out a product or anything like that. We just started talking to potential customers and prospects in the industry a lot, trying to really learn what everyone kind of struggles with. Because it's really difficult to sometimes figure out what all these pharma companies and biotechs and what life science companies in general do internally behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. So we spent a lot of time trying to talk to customers, early adopters, actually mainly also the key opinion leaders and stuff like that. That helped us a lot, like refine the initial product vision. And now, we just have to iterate over it. Yeah.
I feel like there's at the moment, I've been seeing a lot of sort of different biotechs crop up. I feel like there's a lot that you can do within the sort of biotech and biochemistry and like industry. Is there any sort of like, I mean, there must be companies out there in the biotech industry that are like that do something, if not similar, just sort of in the sort of same sort of lines. Do you ever get sort of feel worried that there might be somebody out there that's sort of competing with what it is that your company does?
So, I mean, you as somebody who's not in the biotech industry already see that, right? Even inside the bio industry, sometimes we talk to people and they're all very confused about what's going on. What all these companies do that say they have AI or something like that. And one way in which we set ourselves apart really quickly is by literally showing them a real product, like a piece of software that they can use, which other companies don't do, because they just say, okay, we have this AI technology platform that we can apply to develop new drugs.
But it's not been made
But we are not drug hunters. We are actually just supporting ACT. And I think that is mainly what set us apart. And there's maybe a few companies around that try to really go down the software route, but not very many. And there's a few that try to do both, but that can be quite tricky because, I always like to say, if you sell someone a shovel and then follow them afterwards into the gold mine, they might not really appreciate that. So if you sell someone software and then start digging for drugs yourself, it might not be very appreciated. They might not want to work with you anymore because they might think that you're using the knowledge that they gave you for competing against them.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to not.
But with that being said, would you say that there's any sort of advice that you could give aspiring entrepreneurs that might be in the same sort of market or even different markets to sort of identify the gaps in the market or finding like a problem worth solving? Is there any advice that you could sort of give to people that could sort of like steer them in the right direction when it comes to those sorts of things?
Yeah. I mean, there's something about it which is biotech specific, which is in biotech you have to be quite aware of the overall market dynamics, of that pharma is basically buying everyone in the end. Mm-hmm. And pharma has been doing it for a long time, so you really have to understand how your business model fits in there. Because if you start building drugs, then at some point you will compete against Pfizer. And then you have to be really sure that that's something you can do.
Yeah.
So that's maybe the tricky part in the biotech industry. In general, I think on the other end, we are essentially a tech company that builds a tech product. And there, I think the most important thing is that you start involving your customers early, which initially we didn't do. Okay. So we initially did a bit of like oracling about like what kind of like cool technologies we can sell to people, but they were not really a product. So we built like a mini interface at some point and gave it to people, but they didn't really use it because we actually didn't ask them if they wanted it. And I think this is really difficult, especially coming from an academic background where you're all around the technology. So I was an academic before. So you always think people buy technology, but they don't. In order to build a product, you actually have to ask them what they want, which doesn't come naturally to people from academia, maybe.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. I feel like it's especially with biotech, it's obviously a huge field, but then I feel like it's a very specific and niche field at the same time. There's being in like the recruitment area for the machine learning market, there's not many people that have sort of come from biotech unless it's like something very niche that they're sort of into. It's like a huge market and a huge industry, but very niche at the same time. It's a confusing one. It's a very confusing one.
Yeah, it's weird. It also doesn't really seem to know, or many of these companies don't really seem to know what they want to be, if they want to be more on the tech side or more on the bio side. And then it becomes really difficult with the hiring, right? Do you hire product managers or do you hire scientists? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's the bioinformaticians that they're looking for that have like major expertise in machine learning as well, and it's like,
which is also very rare because bioinformaticians traditionally were not machine learning people.
Yeah,
they were people
exactly.
that work with large genome data sets. And
exactly.
Things like that.
It just gets very confusing. And how would you say you prioritize features or aspects of your product or service during the early stages of development?
Yeah, in the very early stages, I think at some point it's just a leap of faith because we talk so much to people and they tell you all kinds of things. But the problem is what they tell you what they want is not necessarily what they need often. So at some point you literally have to build something that looks like it's real, but it might probably not. Like something like it looks like a real tech interface, but behind it it's you like shifting around the data or something like that. And this has to happen as quickly as possible because only then you really learn what people really want, so what people really need and what solves a problem for them. Because initially they might just throw features at you that they heard about or like papers that they read, but then you ask them, so what does that actually do for you? And they're a bit like, I don't really know. And that leap of faith where you like initially put the first designs together, I think that's really difficult because at some point you have to stop researching and just build something and then iterate over that. And then afterwards it got easier because then you have something you can show people, you get feedback. Yeah. And then you get customers that actually paid, so they're vested, so they're even better. Because initially when you don't have customers yet, again, you can't really believe what they say. But so it's really
good
hard
point to get to.
It's like really hard initially, and then over time it gets hopefully a bit easier. So now we start having our first paid customers on our product. So now we can actually talk to them and have them actually vested in the product and understand what they need.
Is there any advice that you could offer when it comes to building like a minimum viable product?
I think often people say you can like build wireframes or something like that, like show like, I don't know, Figma interfaces to people where people can click through and it kind of like looks like it's doing something. But I think as long as the user thinks they're still not using a real product, any feedback you get back is not that useful. So the MVP is a bit of a misnomer because minimum viable sounds like a little bit like something that's hacked together.
Yeah.
But actually it has to work.
Yeah.
And it has to be something that customers would want to buy. Everything
Absolutely.
before that is
Yeah,
a prototype,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that is maybe quite important because I would say we have an MVP now.
Yeah.
Even though I think early on people sometimes called what we had an MVP, but it was more like a prototype. And that's of course expensive to build these high fidelity interfaces that make customers feel like they're actually using a real app. And that's difficult.
Yeah, definitely hard to have. And it's like, especially getting to that point where you have something that customers are buying and there's like money coming in. It's like, that's when it's like, okay, we have something.
Now we have
it's
an MVP,
working.
and now we're at base camp, and now you have to do everything all over again.
Yeah, and then you need to like improve and just get better from that first.
Like up until that point, investors ask you, oh, where's the money? Where's the money? And then suddenly people are paying you like, oh, here's the money. So why aren't they paying more? Or like when you hit the 10 million ARR and you're like, okay, I mean.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to it. This next question is actually an audience question, and they would like to know, at what stage of developing an idea did you begin involving potential customers? And a follow-up, was it when you had a rough direction, a concrete idea, the first proof of concept, or the prototype stage?
Yeah. So the first time around, we involved them at like prototype MVP stage, and that didn't work at all.
Okay.
And we built something that like didn't really work.
Yeah.
Or didn't work for the customer. So the second time around, we literally started talking to them even without having any designs or prototype. We like basically went in with a completely clear mind and just like tried to figure out what kind of pain points we can solve there. Of course, we had this mountain of technology lying around behind us, but we really had to think hard that we forget about all that.
Yeah.
And figure out exactly what the customer wants. And that worked much better. In the end, it is more work, but I mean, it leads to more success in the product, I think. So involving everyone early on. And because in the end, like, if you just write someone on LinkedIn and ask, hey, do you want to look at what we build? I mean, many people want to kind of help. Some people would say, no, I don't have time, or what are you going on about? But most people will just say yes. So it's kind of easy. Even in like such a like vertical SaaS like what we are doing, where everybody's like a specialist, super high paid people, they're still willing to maybe put aside like 10, 15 minutes to just look at your little wireframes and tell you, that makes sense, that's shit.
Yeah, I feel like it's the starting out that's the hardest part of anything, and actually knowing that you have a viable product and getting to that stage. It's just too much stress. I don't think I could ever do it. And so when did you approach securing initial funding for Deep Mirror? Like how was that for you guys? Because I know that obviously obtaining funding, hard and just stressful, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. But yeah, when did you guys sort of actually approach the initial funding stages for your company?
So initially we were a spin out from Cambridge University.
Yep.
So it was just 3 of us. So we needed some way. So we had a few consultancy projects, but we needed something to pay our salaries at least, because we didn't come from McKinsey or anything like that. So in the first iteration, we essentially just did a little friends and family round of people we knew. So just very small, got something together that's kept us above water. And then a year or so later, we got a few like high net worth individual in as angel investors, which then like kept us going a bit longer. We also got a few grants, which like as a science company is quite useful because you can always easily secure grants. If you're more on the tech side, it gets a bit more difficult. You have to actually go to investors. So it was very much like more constrained growth, bootstrapping, I'd say. So we didn't really do like a full big seed round yet at this stage. But I mean, so far it has been quite useful to just like get a bit of consultancy revenue in, get a bit of grant, a bit of like angel money, and then just focus on the product. Because otherwise, if you focus on fundraising too lot, I mean, especially as the CEO, if you do too much fundraising, you lose the sight of the product again. And fundraising is not a goal. It's more like something you use to achieve something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you don't have anything, I don't know how to say it, but if you don't have a furnace to like shovel all that money in that powers like something that makes money yet, then maybe don't take all that money yet.
Yeah.
Because anyone just throw it into the
You
furnace.
need something you need a plan. You need like like something to actually put it towards.
I think that's the VC point. Like before that, if you need money, just ask a few angels, ask a few friends and stuff like that, or just bootstrap with consultancy deals. Because once you take the VC pill, it's quite hard to get out of that again and say, oh, actually the product doesn't really work. We have to pivot, and they like try to already give you a sales and a marketing team.
Yeah, then it's like there's a lot more to this rather than just actually starting a company. It's like there's a lot more people in there, isn't it? Loads of people involved. No, I just couldn't do it. So we leave this to people like you to do. And so what would you say are some of the latest advancements or breakthroughs in AI that Deep Mirror is leveraging specifically for biology or biotech applications?
Yeah, I think one is on the infrastructure side. Maybe what many people don't really appreciate is how easy it is, or like how much easier it is now to build scalable machine learning infrastructure that can easily on the fly serve models to people, all completely cloud-based, microservice-based, so it's also like quite efficient in a way. So we're leveraging these kind of technologies quite a lot by trying to build a super modern architecture that doesn't cost millions to run every year, which actually enables us to do it as a startup. And then I think more recently, especially with generative AI and things like that, end-to-end solutions become way more possible. So like I'd say always in the last century, when you did anything scientific, you would tend to build very specific simulation algorithms for anything you want to do. Like in drug discovery, for example, you build these docking algorithms that try to figure out how a molecule fits in a pocket of a protein and how these guys interact with each other. And that was very difficult, complicated, and had to be almost rewritten for each application.
Okay.
Now you have these more general AI algorithms that really try to end-to-end solve you something. You just see the protein, you see the molecule, and then AI predicts how they like mangle together, and you basically get two molecules in, one binding affinity out or something like that. Or if you want to generate molecules, you previously had to code really difficult algorithms, and now you just ask ChatGPT to generate you from few molecules, which also actually works. So basically, in the last few years, we got access to these algorithms that make things so much easier because you don't need to do every step anymore. You just throw a bit of data in, and then you get a full end-to-end solution. And it works just as good sometimes as the original algorithms that were developed over decades, right? So my dad, for example, does weather forecasting. And he did these Navier-Stokes equations that were very, very difficult to solve, and like years of development. And suddenly DeepMind comes around the corner, feeds a bit of data into an algorithm, and they can do weather forecasts better than my dad could ever do, right?
Yeah.
And in a way, it's simpler, right? Because you just feed a bit of data in, and you train over a week, but the human like lies back and just relax.
And that's it, and it's all being done.
And this is, I think, happening more and more. And now, basically, previously quite difficult scientific software solutions in a way become much more human-centric and easier, which is kind of what we're trying to do as well. Like people don't have to crunch all the numbers anymore. People just ask, oh, would that molecule make a good drug candidate? Yes, no, maybe, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's essentially what people want. They don't want all these numbers. They just want to have like something that tells them, okay, what would that be like?
Are you utilizing and enabling the use of generative AI quite a lot at Deep Mirror?
Yeah.
You are.
We basically do a lot of like generative AI for generating ideas, and then predictive AI for afterwards prioritizing these ideas.
Yeah.
Because the generator is only as good as the prioritizer is afterwards.
Well, yeah, there
or
is
scoring
that.
function, they call it, I think.
It's got so big at the moment. Too much for my little brain to understand.
Rightfully so in some ways. It's a bit like the .com bubble, right? Everybody's super excited about it. Lots of startup about there. But I mean, some of these things are really good, right? And they make things easier in some ways. Just have to find all these applications. Right?
Yeah, but I just feel like it's like even just the whole of AI, it's advanced dramatically within the last like 1 to 2 years, and it's all just like sort of happening now. And now there's all of these big things like generative AI, ChatGPT, LLMs, and all of these other areas of AI that's now being utilized in other areas such as biology, biotech, biomed. It's interesting to see. It's nice to see. And so, leading on to this next question, in a constantly evolving industry like biotech and AI, how can entrepreneurs stay adaptable and pivot when necessary without losing focus on their core vision, in your opinion?
I mean, of course, having a core vision is always extremely important, because in a way, the vision also tells you about like how you're doing things, right? Like what's your strategy and stuff like that. But I was talking about the investors before, right? And I think it's really important to maybe like postpone the event. I mean, I think a biotech company can't do that so easy because they always need money, right? But a tech company can always postpone the investment until they're really sure that they have something that scales and that they can take further, because it becomes more and more difficult to pivot the more money is on the line and the more investment you took in. So I guess like really trying to wait and trying to find what you think works well before taking all that money is very, very important. And of course staying close to the customers at all times, because I think as soon as like the CEO or like the more managerial people like lose focus on that and just start focus more on fundraising and stuff like that, the products will suffer, and you can't really pivot that easily anymore if like the management is too distracted.
Yeah, that's fair enough. There is so much to it, isn't there? One thing I wanted to ask as well: where did Deep Mirror? Obviously, I know you've got a couple of other co-founders. But did you collectively come up with that name? Is there a story behind the name?
So when we initially started, we did a lot of like biomedical image analysis.
Okay.
Which is where, I don't know, somebody, it's actually quite funny, because initially the first thing that people wanted to buy from us was a piece of software that basically, I mean, take an image and there's a bunch of like noisy lines in there, and take that image and you just want to detect the lines and then maybe ask like how far they go like this and how long are they and how slopey they are. So it's like very, very simple in a way, but not, because they also cross each other and stuff like that. So it was actually quite a difficult computational problem. And we published that as a paper, and then people asked us whether they can like have special versions of that. Can we custom code them something? And we then started doing that, but then we needed to set up a corporate entity. And then we were like, okay, we use deep neural networks to achieve that. And we're basically mirroring some sort of automated workflow, because normally people do that by hand. So it's like a mirror of your capabilities. So it's a deep mirror. And that's how we came up with it. I think something else was AI parrot, but I think that was probably worse.
There's always a story though behind the name of a company, and it's always an interesting one. It's always interesting to hear. And so
it's still a mirror in some ways. It still kind of like tries to mirror your activities in the lab and helps you understand what you're doing in a more data-driven way.
Yeah.
So it still applies.
It makes sense. It goes.
And now it's
it adds up.
So nobody can do anything about it. So.
Exactly. It's done now. It's done. No going back. And can you share an instance where a setback or a failure provided a valuable lesson that influenced the direction and the success of Deep Mirror?
Yeah. I think I mentioned before that we initially tried to build a product that was more focused on image analysis.
Yes.
Right? And there we like really went in quite hard, did a lot of coding, tried to push it out there. And once it was out there available, I think I and maybe some other people have had this attitude of build it and they will come. And I think we kind of learned pretty quickly that's not the case. And I would recommend anyone to not think that happens.
Yeah.
It happens maybe when you develop a drug or something. Like if you're a drug against all kind of cancer, I mean, if you make it, everyone will come, right? You have to just mention in the pub somewhere.
Of course,
Just give me that drug.
I've got this drug.
But if you have a product, if you're building a product, that won't happen. I think there's this weird expectation sometimes that a brilliant product will kind of sell itself. which is
it's just not
really
the case.
true. It's always a bit of work, and also you have to build something that people actually want, and if you don't involve them, it won't work. So yeah, that was a good good lesson.
Was it a case of, before you like sort of come up with this product, going out to potential customer bases and finding out if there is anything specific that people are looking for, like whole things such as focus groups or anything like that? Was that ever a part of the planning of building a product?
If the initial one, not so much. We just kind of thought, because we came from academia and we knew some of the things they struggled with. But turns out most of these things didn't translate well into industry, and academia doesn't have money, right? So they were just like, oh, it's cool, but we won't really pay for it. Because, and that was maybe a bit of the problem, that we didn't really talk to the right people initially. Focus groups it's kind of difficult to get people to do this kind of things. Like the maximum you get is like going to conferences and just chatting up people.
Right.
That works. Yeah. Especially if in like a very scientific industry, and just cold calling people on LinkedIn or something like that. And some people will answer, and then you learn more about their actual difficulties. And you really have to come there with a clean mindset. Like not trying to sell your technology, just trying to understand what they want. You can talk a little bit about what you did before, but keep it very vague and very them focused.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without credibility, it's also difficult to get them interested to talk to you.
Was it just a lot of sleepless nights trying to put together this idea before you actually started it?
I don't think sleepless nights. It's more like I think incremental improvement is so powerful, right? As a compound interest, you just do a little bit every day, but you do the same thing every day, and then over time, suddenly you went from 0 to 50,000.
And it's all fast paced. And how is it that you sort of came to meet your co-founders? Was it through the business idea and strategy, or did you meet beforehand? Was it from university?
We were all in the same research group at the university. All of them a variety of different backgrounds. It's like bioengineering, chemistry, and more from the physics side.
Okay, right.
But they all like in the same lab. It was kind of interdisciplinary lab, which made it quite difficult. Like people were doing simulations and we were doing wet lab stuff, but like dissecting frogs and things like that. I myself actually work with fruit flies, so I was actually also at the lab bench. And we all met in there, and then I think over time became quite clear that we all have very different interests in the company as well. Yeah, it was kind of beautiful. And I think that's not a given. I think sometimes there's a lot of friction between co-founders, but in our case, it can evaporate very quickly, where one guy was mainly interested in software engineering, the other guy is mainly into product design and product development, and I was more interested on the business side, and that kind of naturally, apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very lucky
it's nice,
in this
though.
regard. I heard some horror stories from other
But that's the thing, and it's like, for a successful business, I feel like one of the most like key factors of having a successful business in this world is getting along with your co-founders and actually having a founding team that works well together, gets along with each other, because otherwise everyone's just going to be bickering and fighting and
just can waste a lot of effort on on like not company stuff. I always say you can waste a lot of time like playing company things, like basically writing documents about how to structure the company and stuff like that, instead of actually doing the stuff that brings in the investment and the money. And that's always, can be quite alluring. Once you sit there and you can decide everything yourself. But I mean, up until now, we also found 3 more employees actually, which are also now part of the team. And we were also extremely lucky with those. So maybe we're just lucky, or we have like a good process. I'm not 100% sure yet.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed it goes well. And finally, just to wrap this up, what advice could you give to any aspiring entrepreneurs or aspiring founders out there that are sort of looking to get into a venture within biotech?
I think when biotech very specifically, so after the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of hype around biotech because Moderna and biotech suddenly were super valuable. Yeah. And suddenly there was a huge drive towards especially like founding almost like more textile founders in the industry, which makes it more accessible to maybe people just having a PhD or something like that and just starting out in their career. But I think the biggest difficulty in that industry is that when you start off with a bright idea of a biotech company and you take VC money, they expect you to go to $1 billion company, right? But in the end, if you build a biotech and you sell your asset at some point, or even if you're Exscientia, a very big biotech, you actually will end up with a several hundred mil valuation at the end. So you will not necessarily get that VC turnout, which doesn't make sense too much for VC in a way, right? Except maybe a few that have it structured differently. So you have to be really careful as you consider all these external factors, which are maybe not that obvious if you mainly focus on the science. You have to figure out, okay, so if I build a biotech, what is my game? So am I going to like just develop one drug that gets sold for a few million? I mean, then I won't really do any VC route, right? And then there's a lot of talk about platform play, where you try to build a platform that can churn out drugs very quickly.
Yeah.
But that hasn't really been proven, except in the case of Moderna. And you could argue that Moderna kind of got successful because of COVID, right? So it's really unproven that this whole new hip biotech wave actually works, of all these tech bio companies that are platformers. And you have to be, you have to consider this quite well when you start out, like what's it going to be, right? We at some point decide to be a service provider because that makes us a classical vertical SaaS company, which of course, again, has not really been proven in that space either. But I can still see from other companies like Benchling or something like, or companies like that, that it can work out. Whereas in the other end, you, as I mentioned before, you either get bought by Pfizer or something for a couple $100 million, or you start competing against Pfizer.
Yeah.
And if you want to do that, you have to have some secret that they don't have access to. And if your secret is preclinical, it almost doesn't really matter because most of the drugs fail in the clinic.
Okay.
So 90% of them fail. So if you are really good at developing drugs and put them in the clinic, that doesn't make you better than Pfizer, because Pfizer is still better at running clinical trials potentially, right?
Yeah.
So you might have to have something that increases your success rates in the clinic. And I think there are some companies out there that are trying to do that.
Okay.
But that's the key point.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be hard fighting with those big companies out there, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you have something that makes you able to design drugs that have higher clinical efficacy and less toxicity through some magical choice of a target or a phenotypic system or something, sure. But anything that adds efficiency gains before that is not that useful for like competing against the big ones, right?
Yeah.
That's why like AI ML alone in like hit ID to like lead optimization or something, a bit tricky to say that makes you compete against the big companies.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot out there as well. And I feel like biotech is an ever-growing area of the tech world and the AI world. And there's so many different things that are being made or being done within the industry. It's just there's no end to it, is there? I feel like within that area, it goes as far as your imagination, and there's so much that...
There's a lot to come.
There is a lot to come. There's a lot to come.
And really stretch the surface yet on any... I mean, still most drugs are small molecules, right? And there's all these new drug modalities coming out, which, for example, like the RNA vaccines.
Yeah.
And just the other week, the first CRISPR drug, the CRISPR treatment came out against sickle cell disease. And I mean, there's a lot more to come in this regard.
Exactly, and there's so many other diseases out there that need cures. So
there's always not only diseases, right?
Exactly. Well, exactly. So there's so much to expect. Well, on that note, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Deep Mirror, and the future of your company, and to see what you guys do in the future. So, DS Group wish you the best of luck with everything. Looking forward to seeing it all happen. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you today, Max. So thank you for joining me on Vision to Venture.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Vision to Venture. If you're listening, make sure to give us a 5-star review. And if you're watching, like and subscribe to listen to more inspiring stories from leaders in the tech space.